Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Main Perspective Podcast 2021. I'm your host, Dee Dixon, publisher of Pride Magazine and co-founder of the Women's Intercultural Exchange, or WIE. Today, we are going to have a stimulating conversation with a person I very much admire, JADA, GRANDY-MOCK, who is Fifth Third Bank's Senior Vice President and Chief Corporate Community Economic Development Officer. Hello, JADA, and how are you today?
I'm doing well, Dee. How are you?
I am great. I'm so really thrilled to have you on here. It's just a pleasure for me. And, I actually remember kind of, sort of, when you first came to Charlotte. How many years ago was that?
It was 11 years ago.
Okay. Because, you really stuck with me because I know I approached you about actually getting some money from the bank for something. And you remember that? And, of course, you told me no. But, that was the nicest no that I had ever gotten. So, I thank you for that nice no. You were very kind. But... let's move on to the reason as to why we're here today. Our reason for being is twofold. First, we want to get a sneak peek behind the scenes of who JADA GRANDY-MOCK really is. Is that okay?
That's good.
Number one. And number two, we want to hear from you about a most important subject matter, bridging the racial wealth gap. There's a lot of conversation going on about that, so I can't wait to get to that part. But let's begin. Let's jump right in right now with a few random questions. Okay, so JADA, tell us what really motivates you. What's your source of power?
My source of power is my God and the opportunities that I'm able to see in his ability to use me to really make a difference in people's lives. And when I can see places and spaces that are better off because JADA was there, that motivates and inspires me. What also inspires me are my nieces because they represent such an amazing future. They're able to see and experience things that I was never able to see and experience at their age. They're able to have some social capital that I didn't necessarily have. They have also been and living by experiences and that have been really rich in cultural and educational experiences, and they've been exposed to so much more than I have. And their outlook on life inspires me every single day to let me know that all that I am doing to inspire others to make a difference is working, and the impact that I'm having on young people as well as adults, it matters.
Awesome. How old are your nieces?
So I have one niece that's 4 and one that is 13.
4, okay. She's getting a head start, isn't she?
She is already.
Wonderful. So let's touch on the pandemic for a moment. Now, I'll be honest with you, the onset of the pandemic initially actually threw me into a state of depression. I mean, woof. I have never gotten so sick of looking for toilet paper in all my life. Get up, get dressed, and go find some toilet paper. But what impact did it have on you initially? And then what is the one most important learning COVID-19 has taught you?
Dee, I'm glad you were very real and honest about how it had impacted you initially. And I would say for me, it was the same. It was tough seeing all the people pass away that looked a lot like me, who had very similar experiences that I had growing up. At one point, I just had to turn off the news because it was so devastating, and not being able to see my family. I didn't go into a state of depression, but I did go into a state of help us. And really praying a lot more and trying to keep my own sanity because I'm an extrovert. And so I love being around people, and not being able to be around my family and friends and hug them and see them was really challenging for me. And, even as a leader, it was tough getting to meet the needs of my team members because I'm very fortunate to have a very diverse team, and they've been impacted in a lot of ways like we all have. Some of them lost several family members.
Wow.
Some of them lost a family member or friend, but it was never, as they say, it's three degrees of separation. It was 1 degree of separation for where their lives were turned upside down, and encouraging and inspiring them to still be effective and utilizing my empathy muscle was something that I had to do, and demonstrating compassion and being authentic to let them know that, hey, this is real. While I may be your leader, I'm experiencing this too, and we're in this together. The biggest learning from the experience, though, is family is everything. And life, if I get to have breath in my lungs, that is the best blessing that I can have every day if there's nothing else.
That's awesome. And, this may sound crazy, but for me, I have learned to stock up on things. I have so much toilet paper at the house now. If anything happens, it'll last me a few years. I'm not going out searching for toilet paper. Okay, let's move on. So, it seems I've read all of your resumes and all of that. You have had a stellar banking career, just absolutely stellar. You have over 20 years of experience, and you've certainly climbed that corporate ladder. So can you share a bit about how a Black female becomes a senior vice president in an industry that seems to favor mostly males? How'd you get there?
I will say exposure and opportunity. We hear a lot about the importance of education, and I would say that talent is universal, opportunity is not. And I've been very fortunate to have opportunities presented to me that I took advantage of, even when I had no idea what those opportunities would hold for me. I had some really great mentors. I was the first to work in corporate America. Matter of fact, I never even walked into an office or a corporate boardroom until I was in college. Didn't even know that kind of life existed. I was an intern in Inroads, and Inroads is the one that exposed me to what could be in corporate America. And the first step was just exposure, because I come from a family where I was the first to do so many things. And going to college and graduating was one, and then working in corporate America was the next. And it was because people took a vested interest in me. They saw my potential and opened doors of opportunity for me to meet other people, also to enhance my education, because I did get 3 degrees.
Wow.
And so that has done it, but also I would say a lot of hard work, authenticity, staying true to who I am, and also not being afraid to ask for help and acknowledging what I didn't know. And those things, I would say, have been really critical to the elevation in my career, but also staying spiritually grounded.
Yeah.
And really understanding God's leading and being able to pursue purpose with passion, to align with my profession, and to not allow for compromise, but to stay true to what I was seeking to do.
I love that. I love that spiritual connection that you have. I think that's very, very important. So what has been the most challenging thing for you, on this journey, personally and professionally?
The biggest thing for me personally is acceptance, because I grew up in public housing. I grew up in a community where you didn't go to the barbecue with linen napkins. You went with paper plates and utensils, and you had a good time. And so there was this fear of acceptance, because growing up, I always was teased as, you talk white, you look white, you think white, very differently than what I was told by my parents, who didn't necessarily put a color on education, but said that people can take anything from you, but they can't take what you know. And so that is what drove me to continue to learn and to grow, whereas my peers saw that as she's very different. And I didn't know how they would accept me as I continued to grow in my corporate career. And so I stayed connected to a lot of those folks growing up because I did not want them to think that Jada was different. I wanted them to know that while I may have risen and been very blessed, that I haven't forgotten about the journey and I haven't forgotten about them. That was tough. And acknowledging that I am different and it's really okay. And I'm different because my life's experiences have been different. My opportunities have been different, but that doesn't make me any more than they are. It just means I took a different track. And I acknowledge the tracks that they have taken, even though that they're different, and acknowledge people for who they are. So personally, that's been the biggest challenge.
Did you feel that you didn't fit in a lot of times, during this period?
I did. I did, and still do sometimes because I am the only in my family. So when we sit down and have conversations, we don't have corporate talk conversations because they're not in that space. Right? We have everyday life talk about their challenges, about their struggles, about ways that they're trying to climb and be successful in their own right and what they're trying to accomplish. So that was definitely a journey. And I'm glad you asked that question because I've battled with that. That's something that, I think many of us have those within that we're afraid to talk about. But I think for me, it's an acceptance of it's really okay to grow and to learn and to have different experiences. Just staying humble, I think, is key for me. Professionally, Dee, the hardest thing has been maintaining authenticity and speaking up because I think that as we rise as leaders, we have an obligation that if we're invited to the table and we don't know the menu, but when we get there, understand what's being served, be okay with not eating it. And walking away. And understanding that we have to stand in our truth. And my truth is I am an African-American woman who loves God and is seeking to make a difference personally and professionally in the lives and the spaces and places that I occupy. And I am going to do that in every place that I sit. I'm going to do it tactfully. I'm going to do it respectfully. But I believe that with privilege comes purpose. And I'm going to make sure that I'm a good steward of that privilege that God has given me at the tables that I sit in.
I love that, Jada. I commend you for that, 100%. Let's move on a little bit and start talking about that racial wealth gap. And I have a specific question for you, but let me give our listeners a little bit of context, and then that'll give you time to prepare your answer. How about that?
Okay.
The racial wealth gap is huge, and there's no end in sight. And let me quote some 2019 data from the Federal Reserve Bureau of Labor and the Forbes Rich lists. It was found that the 400 richest Americans held more wealth than all Black households in America, plus a quarter of Latino households. Again, it was found that the 400 richest Americans held more wealth than all of the Black households in America, plus a quarter of the Latino households combined. So let's let that sink in for a moment. I mean, that statement there just blows my mind, literally. It really does. But from your perspective, Jada, what's wrong with that picture?
The wealth is not equally distributed. There is a small few in our country where the wealth is held. And with wealth also comes power, believe it or not. And when you have that kind of wealth centered in such a small segment of the population, it has significant consequences for the remaining. And it's going to take a concentrated effort for that wealth to be equally or better. I would not necessarily say equally, but better distributed, so that Americans have a fair chance of prosperity and being able to grow, not just grow, but get wealth, grow it, and transfer it.
Yep.
Because that didn't happen overnight. Those 400 families did not happen overnight. That is generational.
Absolutely.
That has occurred. And in order for us to have more equality and more opportunity for more Americans to experience the opportunity to build wealth, we've got to do some things different. We've got to do some things different as a people.
Absolutely. We're going to get to that. But I agree. With Pride Magazine, we're using this year to focus on this racial wealth gap, because the first step to me is we need to open up our minds about the gap itself, because we're living our lives and not realizing where we are compared to the white race.
Yes.
And, we're blind.
Yes.
So, first things got to start with our thinking. So here's my question to you. I want you to ponder this, because it's been said that greater educational attainment on the part of blacks will close or help close the racial wealth gap. The greater educational attainment on the part of blacks will close or help close the racial wealth gap. I don't know if your parents said it or grandparents, but, back in the day, I don't want to expose how old I am, but, go to college, get your degree, get your education, and that is your ticket out here in America. So what's your perspective on this?
So I don't believe education in itself closes the wealth gap. But what I will say, in my case, education was the gateway to greater opportunities for me to be on that wealth creation journey. Because I'm not totally there yet, but I'm going to get there. I will have a legacy to be able to leave for my family, and that's my goal. But I would say that higher education does breed an increase in earnings. Now, in study after study have shown us that. But also, I would say social capital, I think, is really important, because once you get the degree, you have to have access to the opportunities to actually earn the wages that will be necessary for wealth creation to even occur in the first place. The other, I would say, is exposure. It is so important for us to understand what is available to us, taking advantage of those career opportunities that actually will allow us to increase our earnings.
Yes.
While I understand and I'm a proponent of passion, I'm also a proponent of wealth creation for my family, and thinking about ways that I can utilize my mind and my skill set combined with passion to be able to do that. So I don't think it's an end all. I also think that there's some systems in place, right, that need to be fixed. Yeah. And I know that over the past week or so, we've seen a lot about Greenwood, right? We've seen a lot that has happened over time, and there's some systems and some policy ramifications out there that I believe that won't necessarily be the end all and end all, because this is not something that's going to happen overnight.
Right.
This wealth gap didn't get created overnight. It was over time. So it is going to take small steps that I would say that have big returns for each and every one of us in the spaces and places that we occupy. Whether you're in a corporate boardroom, the nonprofit boardroom, whether you're in government, civic leadership, in the church, whether you are an executive in corporate America, and you know what, whether you're sitting at the table having a conversation with your family about what it really means to create wealth building opportunities for people, we've got to do better. And it's not going to happen. So education, while education is an aspect, I don't believe it's the end all to be all.
I agree. I agree. And I'll quote something from a study. And if anybody wants to challenge me, I can tell you where I got this information. I'm not going to bore you with all of that.
Okay.
But listen, it says the on the average, a black household with a college-educated head has less wealth than a family whose head did not even obtain a high school diploma. That's astounding. And it takes a postgraduate education for a black family to have comparable levels of wealth to a white household with some college education or just an associate degree. So I think that, lends towards your statement of the system.
Absolutely.
The system. So getting an education, to me, just personally, that's a myth right there, that's going to help us become wealthy. I mean, it could, but it is not the all in all. So I agree with you 100%. Another thing, to think about with this education, college education now, college kids come out in debt.
Yes.
What do we deal with? And black kids are in more debt than white kids.
They are.
So, what are we going to do about that?
There's one component here that I'm really passionate about, and it is this student debt crisis, because that plays a role in even expanding the inequality gap. Because when they graduate, their debt to incomes are often so high that they can't apply or they can't get approved for a business loan if they want to pursue entrepreneurship, or if they want to be able to pursue home ownership, which are two key ways that wealth is built in the United States of America, right? And if you look in contrast to the white family, as you have described, the differences of wealth is oftentimes they go to school and they had a relative help because somebody left a legacy where there was a transfer of wealth event, whether it was through real estate, whether it was through life insurance, whether it was through the sales of a business, or the success that they've had and been very financially conscious about their resources allowed them to be able to get the kids a head start. So they are already ahead at the very beginning before they even graduate. So that is one, I wouldn't say total explanation, but it impacts where people start and where people end. And this college debt crisis is really something that I'm passionate about. I'm personally, pouring into students and providing scholarships for them personally, because I just believe that this opportunity to be able to get educated, to be able to increase your earning power is the first step. If they combine some also personal financial knowledge, let's talk about that too, because you can get personal financial education, but you have to apply it. So I call it applied personal financial education, because when you know better, we should do better, right? And that plays a role in it as well. In these scholarships, I can't re-emphasize the importance of scholarships. I can't tell you, Dee, how many people I've spoken with and says, there's no scholarships out there for me. Have you tried? Well, I don't believe that that's possible. And it really burdens me when I hear students say that, because there's opportunity out there. That's why mentors are so important. And again, I'm hitting on a lot of things because this student debt crisis can be fixed if we come together as a community and own what our students are facing and say, how do we come together as a collective so that we can change the trajectory of what our students are experiencing?
Amen. And preach, sister JADA. I tell you, we could go on forever. So I agree with you 100%. 100%. But now, you were on the cover of Pride magazine. Was it March, the women's issue? It's amazing.
Thank you for that.
You listeners out there, if you want to get the magazine, let me know, and we'll send it to you. But I think in there it said that you helped your brother. You paid for his college education.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about that. That's wonderful.
Well, growing up, it was me and my brother and my mom. My dad didn't live in our home. We knew who our father was, but he didn't live in the home at the time. And we grew up experiencing a lot. For me personally, it was 15 funerals between 9th and 12th grade, drug abuse, it was teen pregnancy, just all of the negative facets that impact one child's ability to be successful we experienced. My brother dodged bullets all the time. I'm so fortunate that God was covering him because he survived in the wrong place at the wrong time, but he made it. Which reminded me that I had a responsibility as his big sister because my mom wasn't able to say, not only am I going to make it out, but you're going to make it out too. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you're successful. So when I got my first job, I had just graduated and I got my first job and he was going into college. And I remember him wanting to be this big basketball player because he was an athlete and the scholarships were not coming in like they should. And he said, sis, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I said, oh, I know what you're going to do. You're going to start and you're going to finish because the alternative is not an option. So I sacrificed personally. And I went to the college. I took him to school, packed up my car, met with the college professors, and made sure that he was off to a good start. The bills came to me from time to time and was able to support it with God's help. I don't know how I was able to do it with the salary that I had at the time, but again, it's just that supernatural favor that I can't explain that allowed me to support him. And you know what? Now I'm so proud. That's probably one of the proudest moments in my life. My brother is a family man. He is a homeowner. I was the first homeowner in my family. He is the second homeowner in my family. He also has graduated. He has 3 beautiful children, and he is married. And I say all that to say, because in the African American community, the family structure has not been as important, in my opinion, as it should be. And the family structure is impacting his ability to be able to expose and provide for his family and his children. Not to mention, he's an amazing car salesman in Pittsburgh, like just doing some amazing things, and even actively involved in the community, so much so that that very same community that we grew up in, he is now giving back personally and professionally.
I love it. I love it. And you said one word in there, sacrifice. You made the sacrifice. And that is what it takes. That's what's going, that will be what it will take, I think, for the Black community to bridge that racial wealth gap. We've got to sacrifice some of the things we're doing. That's such a beautiful story. I can't even talk. I love that. And giving back, giving back, not just making it there, but reaching down and pulling somebody else up. We've got to get that in our minds.
We do.
So you are a great example of that. And so I don't know if we're running out of time, but let's pose one more statement for thought about the racial wealth gap. So I think it's kind of believed that Black people saving more will help close the racial wealth gap. Black people saving more. Now, you're a banker, and so you should be on top of this. So now, is this true or false? If we save more, will we be able to kind of close that racial wealth gap, Jada?
No. We'll never be able to save enough to be able to do that. As we shared before, there's a lot of other factors that are involved in closing the wealth gap. But I would say savings is important, but so is mindset and how we spend our dollars. Because when we talk about bridging the wealth gap, we're not talking about it just in families, individual families. We're talking about as a collective African-American race. And so when we are deciding on where to spend our dollars, where we do business impacts this wealth gap. Because my ability to be able to support another minority-owned business or Black-owned business allows them to be able to pour into their family and to be able to build the wealth. I would also add that for those that have a desire to start a business, making sure that they have access to capital. Also making sure that we're paying people, right? You can't save if you don't earn enough to be able to take care of your basic living expenses. And so that's going to be important as well. And then having access to tools like home ownership, like life insurance, like being able to have disposable income to invest. Because in order for you to be able to invest, you've got to have some disposable income to be able to do that after you take care of your basic needs. So Dee, you're right. I agree that savings is not going to it's not going to close the wealth gap in all, and it's not the end all be all, but I will say it is important. And we don't do enough of that.
Yep.
And we need to do more of it.
But here's one thing, I'm always reading these studies. So this one study says that, and I've had this in my mind, I'll be honest with you that we are consumers. Black people are consumers. We spend, we buy the Nikes and all of that. But now I have read a report that says, if anything, Black families actually have a slightly higher savings rate than their white counterparts. Now that, y'all may kind of test it. Isn't that interesting?
I didn't know that.
Okay, let me think about this a little bit more. But I think to move on, I think this same article says the difference is not in that we're not saving, but it's with that pension plan.
Yes.
So you know what I'm saying?
Goes back to the tools,
yes,
right? It goes back to the tools that we're not leveraging because we are consuming.
Right.
That we're not utilizing the tools at our disposal to be able to help us to create wealth.
Absolutely. So, and we just don't make that sacrifice again to to put into our pension plans if one exists. At work these days, you might not even have one available for you. So
yeah, they have 401ks and 403bs and all kind of things out there. But at the end of the day, what's important is that when we know better, we do better. If those tools are available, people should be taking advantage of them.
Right. And I know we're going to kind of wrap this up now, and I wanted to go over some statistics compiled by the UNC Charlotte Urban Institute about the racial wealth gap here in Charlotte, but I won't go over a lot of these things, but, they have found here in Charlotte that nearly 1 in 3 Black households have zero or negative net worth. I mean... And so I'm going to leave you with this question. What advice would you give the Black community in general? I know this is hard. What should we be doing to at least begin to try to bridge this racial wealth gap?
Think collective and not alone. Because at the end of the day, if I am succeeding and everyone else is not, I'm just standing still. Progress of the whole is better than the progress of one. And so if we are going to close this wealth gap, we have to support each other. We have to get educated on the tools and the access that's available. We have to be conscious about the dollars that we make. We have to continue to be advocates for ourselves and for each other. We have to participate in policy making and make sure that our voices are heard. So when there's a bill on the floor, you need to be talking to your Congress folks, you need to be talking to your senators, and understand that we are extremely powerful if we think more about the collective and what we can do collectively than if we just think about ourselves.
Thank you, JADA. You have been amazing. I really appreciate your insight, your perspective. This has been a wonderful conversation. And I'm going to close with this thought. Income allows a family to get by. Wealth allows a family to get ahead. We need to get ahead. And stay tuned for episode number 2 coming up. Goodbye, everybody.